So the program has changed a little this morning, and then I'd like to make this as just open as possible. So first, please introduce yourself and your organization or company, and then also probably the vision of your project.
Should I go first?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Vansa. I'm the managing director of OmiseGo. And our goal is to build an open and permissionless payment system that's available for everyone. And we're doing that by building essentially two solutions. One is an open source decentralized exchange. The other one is a wallet SDK, an e-wallet SDK. And we're actually, the reason we're building a decentralized exchange is very much for utilitarian purposes. Our OmiseGo grew out of a parent company, Omise Payment Gateway, which essentially, we had our founding mission was payments for all, right? Online payments for all. But what Payment Gateway does is it's switching transaction between credit card networks and between merchants and customers. And so what we realized is we were actually touching a very small fraction of the population, and we're not actually reaching our mission. And so in 2015, we started looking into blockchain, and what we realized is that there's a potential that we can build, leveraging a decentralized network, to provide this more peer-to-peer payment services for people. And I was just walking around Zook today, and actually, you might not realize it, but in Asia, there's a lot of friction still in terms of payments. If you look at Thailand, a third of the population have some sort of access to credit card, but that still varies in scale, right? It doesn't mean they can use it as freely as they want to. So being able to tackle that and leveraging the decentralized exchange gives us kind of hope that we can reduce frictions in people's lives and also make payments better for everyone.
I'm Vitalik. I'm from Ethereum. I also advise a bunch of stuff, including at least one centralized exchange, weirdly enough. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just do research and development on general purpose decentralized world computing platforms, and I think those are great.
Yeah, well, by the way, the reason why we have Vitalik here is he made some interesting comments yesterday about centralized and also decentralized exchanges. And then we thought we should bring him on to the stage so that we can have more interesting conversation. But yeah, but then also another reason why. I used to be at a centralized exchange. I've been on this kind of panel before.
Actually, our first interaction was
Yes, and then it wasn't really easy to discuss this centralized versus decentralized discussion. So like today, I hope we can talk a little deeper. Sorry. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Balaji Srinivasan. I'm the CTO of Coinbase, a centralized exchange. But we also actually now own something that's like moving towards a decentralized exchange, which is DExs. So we're actually very interested in the space, and we do believe it's going to become a more and more important component of the crypto space over the years to come.
Okay. Thank you. So as you know, this industry or ecosystem moves very quick and has changed. What do you think is your project, the role of your project in this ecosystem?
In the exchange ecosystem?
Yeah.
Well, so we very much believe that a decentralized exchange will be one of those things that we're building infrastructure, right, essentially. So I mean, my vision for us, and today we're kind of we're trying to move towards that, is in 5 to 10 years, you don't really look at decentralized exchange as a product, as the way that people talk about it today. It just becomes a ubiquitous part of your life. So for OmiseGo, we have a wallet SDK that anyone can access, essentially compile it and then put it into your app, and you will directly get connected to the decentralized network. What that does is it opens up a whole, we were talking about it backstage, right? What the roles of exchange, both decentralized and centralized, and how that opens up a whole host of opportunity for people to do new businesses. So today we're developing an infrastructure. Like I think DExs have its limitation in terms of scaling at this point, but we're hoping to address that with Plasma. There's a lot of user education that also needs to happen along the way. But as we move towards the goal of becoming ubiquitous infrastructure, hopefully users just need to realize how do they use an app, how do they essentially interact with coins, how do you pay for things. The answers.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess to answer the actual question, Ethereum is, first of all, it's the platform that's going to be the base chain for the OmiseGo Plasma chain, but also it's the platform that a lot of these ERC20, 223, 721, whatever tokens end up being ultimately based on. So it has kind of ended up being the platform on which a lot of the action happens for better or for worse. I guess my view regarding why decentralized exchanges are important is that I want to see turning one token into another to be as close to a kind of seamless public utility as possible. So basically, I want to see the ease of converting from token A into token B be something that doesn't depend on political decisions made by 5 guys hanging out in a cafeteria in San Francisco or Beijing. I just wanted to be something that if there are counterparties that wants to trade, you can just hop onto a permissionless network and trade. And ideally, in the long run, I think we could even get to the points where we see a world where you have user A that has maker coins and who's a consumer, and then user B who's a merchant who has Doge coins that are a totally different currency on a totally different blockchain. And the first user could just basically pay to the QR code provided by a second user. The whole thing would be kind of automatically routed through some kind of decentralized channel Plasma whatever based exchange network, and the payments would happen almost as though it was all within the same system. So I think that getting as close as possible to that, and basically both in order to kind of improve people's efficiency and in order to put kind of smaller assets on the same footing as larger assets is something that I think is important. And also, of course, just the fact that if you issue an asset, I do not think that I think that your incentives should be to develop the product and not to make your system look impressive to the kinds of people who hang out in the cafeterias in San Francisco and Beijing. So I'm very excited about OmiseGo. I'm very excited about the proliferation of Paradex, all of these different platforms, and some of the centralized ones like Shapeshift that try to move a lot very far in the direction of providing more and more convenience in terms of their ability to bring us closer to that vision.
Yeah, so we're also in our cafeteria very bullish about decentralized exchanges, and the reason for that is everybody, all of us, we got into blockchain because of the permissionlessness, among other things. And you shouldn't have to go and get somebody's permission to go and list or what have you, or to be able to get some liquidity for your token or what have you. And the internet will always be bigger than any one company. So it is good, and we're happy that these decentralized exchanges are out there and that they're growing in volume. Right now, there's about 1% to 99% ratio, I think, last I checked. But it's going to continue to grow because it was 0% not so long ago. So first, we're happy we're out there. We've got an actually investment in the space, and we're tracking it, and we want it to grow. Second, right now, just from a pragmatic standpoint, to put everything on the blockchain doesn't scale, and so approaches like 0x, if you guys are familiar with that, like modular approaches that have some of the state, the order books and so on off-chain, and the actual final settlement on-chain, that seems to be a good hybrid approach that allows you to kind of have some of the best of both worlds, of both decentralized settlement and then centralized liquidity pools. And then third, I think, to the point about infrastructure and decentralized exchange being a part of infrastructure, I think a lot about file conversion. For example, when you convert a JPEG to a PNG, that is a transformation of bytes that's happening locally on your computer. If you convert some of token A into token B, there's going to be some transformation happening locally on your computer and also transformation happening on, let's say if they're both in the Ethereum blockchain, on the blockchain. So you've got both the local transformation and remote transformation. And that kind of thing, as DEXs and this type of stuff becomes more seamless, in maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, you have a program that will, in the background, execute a bunch of transactions, and maybe it'll buy some file coins for file storage and maybe some VPN coins for using a VPN or what have you. And all that will be done in the background, and it'll be like a protocol kind of handshake that you don't have to worry about any more than you worry about your HTTP or TCP handshakes that are happening. So that's kind of how we think about the space.
Vitek, do you have any comments on the role of centralized?
No, and I definitely appreciate the work Coinbase was doing. I very much appreciate the work in the case that the rumor was true of Coinbase refusing the, I believe, offer from Ripple to pay $1 million to get listed on Coinbase. Very much, and I also think that like the work, especially in terms of like increasing the convenience of moving between the crypto system and the fiat system, where it is much harder to create interfaces purely technologically, is important.
Yeah. So speaking to that, like basically, fiat is centralized, and so being this kind of bridge and interface between the fiat world and the crypto world, everybody here has heard about crypto stuff endlessly, hundreds, thousands of times. But we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that maybe there's 20, 30, maybe 50 million people who hold crypto, but we've probably got on the order of 50 to 100x growth in front of us. We still need to get billions of people into the space. And for many of them, they're only going to have dollars, or they're only going to have renminbi or yen or what have you. So the fiat rails and that interface is going to be an important bit for a very long time. And that's not going to be decentralized for a while. Now, the counter argument is you could use something like a stable coin or what have you, but even then that stable coin will have to be redeemed at something that is effectively a centralized exchange, because you'll need to get dollars or that fiat out at some point. So I don't think the centralized component goes away, but I do think that we're going to figure out interesting ways to monetize and scale the decentralized component over time.
I actually have a kind of a question maybe for you as well, because you have an experience with working on centralized exchange before, right? So like as we look into 2019, and a lot more projects are going to go mainnet, hopefully, knock on wood. As a from a decentralized exchange perspective, we look at, we're just in infrastructure, right? Like we're providing services for these utility coins to then get traded across and stuff. But for a lot of the centralized, and I'm not necessarily saying Coinbase alone, like it would be great if Binance was here as well for this discussion. Sure. A lot of the trades now are speculative. So as there's more utilities to the coins, how do you steer your product and your product roadmap? Yeah, that's a good question. So, the company that I sold to Coinbase, we're actually integrating it with Coinbase infrastructure now. That is Earn. It is absolutely a utility play in the space where people pay to get replies to emails, and we got that to about a 10 million run rate before we sold it. And that's because senders want to pay people to reply to emails, and people want to get paid to reply to emails. The thinking is that by integrating that into the Coinbase infrastructure at maybe 100x scale, now we have a daily recurring demand for cryptocurrency that has nothing to do with speculation, but it's simply because you want to go and send mass emails, right? So that's the kind of thing which I think is interesting in the medium term, where you start to get demand that is recurring because people want to accomplish a task, not because they're speculative. And that's the kind of thing that over time, builds the utility of the space. Okay.
Okay. I'd like to move on to the next question. So what are your biggest challenges now for probably everyone in this, for any aspects?
Scalability.
Shipping plasma.
Yay, shipping plasma. Plasma has been making a lot of progress recently, right? And we've been seeing, I think, like Loom made that release. DExs is moving towards something. Then there was that, like very Plasma-like project that came out of Liquidity, and I've been seeing inside of OmiseGo, there's been a lot of work moving forward, a lot of theoretical stuff by people like Dan Robinson on Plasma Debit. So at least I personally am very happy about what's been happening on the technology side. As I think I said on Twitter a couple of days ago, I do think the community needs to maintain vigilance and basically make sure that each and every one of these projects claiming to be a Plasma chain actually does have the non-custodial properties, so that the exchange or whatever system is using Plasma actually can't steal your funds. But if I think we are close to seeing systems that actually have those security guarantees go live, and it would be great to see how well they work.
Yeah, for us, actually, from a business perspective too, because we're B2B in terms of we're trying to approach businesses to adopt the SDK, right? So user education and like partner education is what we spend a lot of essentially our business development time doing. And when you try to approach large conglomerate, it's both ways, right? It's like trying to understand their supply chain, their issues, but also at the same time educating them and getting them to look at it differently, a different mindset. So I think that's the other. I mean, that's more like on the business challenge of how do you start having even a common vocabulary is hard to establish.
Yeah, and then you also talk to big financial institutions.
We do, and governments.
Do you think the communication has changed? Now, do they understand better now?
Yeah, I actually think it will take time, but it's a learning process for everyone, right? It's also a learning process for us. Every time we go and talk to a new client, or even every time we progress the conversation, we start to get a better understanding of like, okay, this is a good way to approach someone. This is a good way to explain it to someone. The way that I explain blockchain to my parents versus the way that I explain it to somebody else is always going to change, because the use case is so wide that context and kind of people's background dictates a lot on how they start picking that up and how they understand the culture around it. Yeah.
So looking back, my experience like back in 2013, like I had to start with like actually even getting a bank account was extremely hard to do a business, and then I always had to start with explaining about Bitcoin, how Bitcoin works. Like, never was able to talk about the business. It's just how blockchain and Bitcoin works. But maybe question to you, Raj. I think like, is that part of your challenge still? Is it hard to get to do enough education or talking with different stakeholders, including regulators or other institutions? Is it still a challenge?
Well, I think one huge difference now versus a few years ago is that everybody in finance has heard the word blockchain 1,000 times. And it's actually kind of important, because you have folks at very senior levels who are at least discussing the concept, even if they're attacking it or supporting it, defending it, being neutral publicly. Jamie Dimon knows what it is. Augustin Carstens knows what blockchain is. So does Christine Lagarde, who's for it. So does Lloyd Blankfein, who's tentatively for it. And that's important, because then you're not trying to explain everything de novo. And so that's come out of this kind of message board bubble to the tech bubble to finance and government. And to the early adopters, which includes everybody here. But it hasn't yet really come to the masses. Lots of folks have heard about it, but they don't use it on a daily basis like they use Facebook and Twitter and social networks. So I think the education problem at the elite level, we're starting to make significant progress. But blockchain, it's not in K through 12. It's not in really college undergraduate education. It's a little bit in graduate education. That's because it started on a message board. So I think we still have a lot to do. And I think one thing to keep in mind is we have to keep our interfaces simple because 95, 98% of all blockchain users, maybe 99% depending on how you count, have yet to be onboarded. So much of that education is yet to be done.
Yeah, great.
And it's actually something that, you know, like as much as we're saying, okay, decentralized versus centralized exchange, it's something that we both need to do together. It's like an effort to push that forward, right, for the entire space.
Yeah. Speaking of working together, so now that you explained your role and challenges, how can we, or is there room to cooperate? We always tend to split this into centralized and decentralized, but what do you think is?
I mean, we actually have a decentralized exchange. Yeah, we're definitely cooperating. I think, you know, if you look at the model like 0x, you can actually use centralized liquidity to, you know, help bootstrap a decentralized exchange. I don't think it's going to be a continuous shift over like this. It's going to be a gradual kind of thing, you know, we're in favor of it. So yeah, thumbs up.
And then definitely, I'd like to hear from Vitalik. What do you think is the best way for centralized and decentralized system to work together?
How can Coinbase work?
Right. So one, I think, thing that we haven't talked about yet is the idea of kind of like more specialization. So like there are specific areas where centralized exchanges do much, I think, do much better in an irreplaceable way, which is specifically the interface between the cryptocurrency and fiat side. And one thing that this means is that like it creates a natural role for there to exist kind of separate classes of entities which offer like do exchange between banking system fiat and cryptocurrency-backed fiat tokens on one side, and on the other side like all kinds of exchanges between like fiat-backed cryptocurrencies and other kinds of cryptocurrencies. And you know, like there already are at least a few of those available, but I think it would help to have more. It would help to have more with kind of more accessible gateways, more better transparency, better just generally being better at kind of convincing, you know, like regulators and the public and the crypto community that they work well and are something that's kind of safe to use, and that's some. So I think that like the more of those kinds of things that there is, so like basically some kind of gateway, some kind of thing that's closer to specializing between being a maximally efficient gateway between the fiat world and the crypto world, I think is something that's highly complementary and good for, you know, like both kind of the other side of exchanging, which is trading one kind of cryptocurrency to another, and the utility and adoption of public blockchains in general.
How about you, Vansa? Anything to add?
I think you summarized it very well.
Okay. Okay. So maybe the last question is, what are your next plans? Do you have any new plans?
No new plans, just trying to ship plasma. Start.
Okay.
We're making you proud.
Well, I don't have time to personally audit the 5 different plasma implementations, so I'm trying to yell at people to encourage others to do this.
We have a lot of stuff that we've announced that's coming out. We have support for a bunch of ERC20 and assets in Ethereum Classic. We also have, we announced Coinbase Custody, so you can store your crypto with us. We got a broker-dealer license, so we might be able to eventually blockchainify traditional equities markets. We have this, you know, which is pretty cool, bringing all the benefits of blockchain to, you know, Wall Street. I think is really interesting in the medium term. And so we're kind of, certainly we have a huge part of the business that's focused on the crypto side. We have a huge part of the business that's also focused on the fiat side, and basically, you know, in a sense, reforming Wall Street by presenting an example of what a better world could be. So we want to maintain that balance. That's one of our, you know, focuses and the kinds of things we think about.
Yeah, but I wanted to build on actually Vitalik's point is that we are, you know, we announced a partnership with Status yesterday. We are looking for other partners, and not just, in terms of market adoption, but also in terms of technological and use case experimentation and being able to actually, design and adjust the product itself so that it serves other projects and other needs. So I'm using this as kind of like an advertisement. Please get in touch.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for a wonderful talk.